I'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsor. If you have a laser device for training and you want to take it to the next level, or if you're looking to get into using a laser device for training, check out the products at laserapp.com. LASRAPP.com. You can use code CSP2021 for 15% off the items you've selected. And thanks for checking them out. Welcome to this week's episode of the Casual Shooters Podcast. Unlike the last 3, 4, 6, 7, I don't know how many, I actually have a co-host today. Everybody welcome Leo.
I do exist.
He does. Chris is still, absent, but huggy, but it's all good. Before we bring our guest on real quick, I wanted to say, what did you think of the Hoist drink?
Oh, I bought a bunch.
The reason I ask is I have now at the Virginia State match last weekend, I heard some success stories and I saw one.
Boom.
So
shout out to Hoist. Yeah, no,
shout out to Hoist.
Using our code. Was it Casual Shooter Podcast? The code?
It just right? Casual Shooter.
Oh, Casual Shooter. I bought. It ended up being $90 because it saved 10%. But yeah, I got a case and then a bunch of the powder ones.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so if you're listening and you have hydration issues, definitely get some Hoist. That stuff works for real. Legit.
Yep.
Well, this week, speaking of the Virginia State match, I was at that match and I look over and I'm like, oh, look, it's an Air Force shooter. Wait a minute. And I looked back behind me because I saw Nick Freilich and I'm like, their jerseys look completely different. I'm like, this is really odd. Why is Nick's jersey completely different from this other individual who meets the height requirement for production national champion? And,
okay. So above 6 foot.
Yeah. He's like, I'm going to guess 5'16".
Got it.
That's what I'm going with. So I was like, you know what? Me being the shy person I am, I went right over to him and I'm like, excuse me. Hi, this is who I am. I noticed that your jersey is different. So anyway, ran into another Air Force shooter, not an action shooting team member, but he shoots on another team. He shoots Smallbore and international rifle. And I was like, we got in a little bit of a conversation, started talking about things, very unique background, lots of information, traveled Europe shooting these matches and stuff. So I was like, you know what? We've got to have you on the show. So that is our guest this week. He's a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. So let me go ahead and bring him on. His name is Robert Davis. Hi, Robert. How are you?
Doing well. How are you guys doing?
Doing quite well ourselves. I assume you heard the intro there?
I did, yes.
Okay. All right. If you would take a moment and just introduce yourself for the audience.
Okay. I'm Robert Davis, and I'm the team captain for the Air Force International Rifle Team. And I've been shooting competitively since 1993.
Nice.
I won't tell you how old I was.
Yeah.
Not very. What, 10, 11?
9.
Oh, okay.
I was close.
Well, at least you were born, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, before we get into our normal questions on where we start, since you mentioned that, was that brand new in the Air Force, or were you shooting before the Air Force?
Oh, before the Air Force. So
Okay.
I started shooting rifles when I was about 6 years old with my dad. And then in middle school, when it looked to see, like what high school I was going to go to, my dad was all excited because he's like, oh, your high school's got a rifle team. And apparently they're pretty good. And so I shot in the Army JROTC rifle team for the 4 years of high school. And I'll never forget the coach back then, or like the senior military official we had for JROTC. He ran the rifle team, and he told me that because I had prior shooting experience, because there was like tryouts, right, for that first year. And he said because I had prior shooting experience, he didn't think I'd be any good. And ended up having, out of like the 10 people trying out, I had the tightest shot group. We just plopped down like on a bench and shot at 50 yards, or 50 feet even, actually. I think, yeah, JROTC is 50 feet. And we shot like, 10 or 15 shots with a 22 small bore, and I had the tightest group. So I was pretty happy about that. But I know what he meant. My dad was really offended by that remark when I came home and told him that. He's like, "You said you were going to be the worst."
Yeah. He thought you had a lot of bad habits.
Bad habits. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Robert, how we normally start this is we have 5 questions that we start with. They're personal questions to get to know the guest. And the first one we usually go with is, what's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie. Well, that's a hard question because I'm a huge movie buff, a really huge movie buff. And I think it, like, face value, like if we talk about like all the technical and story aspects of a film that I really enjoy, I'd probably say Titanic, actually, because I'm a big James Cameron fan as well. But a film that I can watch repeatedly, like over and over again, would actually be Terminator 2, which kind of explains what's.
I never would have guessed why you had a T1000
right?
sitting behind you.
Yeah. Terminator 2 was really the first film that really kind of got me into movies and wanting to collect things from movies and news clippings and all that. And it manifests in this day into life-size statues. This is one of 3 life-size Terminator 2 things that I have. So,
wow,
I'm so jealous right now.
Yeah, that's impressive.
All right, kids, for those if anyone's wondering. This is me and my wife. So, and she's really awesome. So
you must have. I mean, listen, I love my wife. I would be willing to say your wife is cooler than mine.
Yeah,
that's okay. She doesn't listen to this show, so whatever.
Well, there you go. Yeah, my wife really enjoys a lot of the stuff that I collect too, and she doesn't. She says she doesn't have like a sense of decoration, so she's actually really happy with the movie posters and collectibles and stuff that we have up around the house. So
I might cry a little bit.
Yeah. all I can say out there, my advice is marry well. So.
Well, he's already married twice, so
yeah, I can't. It's too expensive now.
There you go.
I love you, baby. Just kidding. You're the best.
So, for those of you that don't normally watch YouTube, make sure you go to our Instagram page, because the thumbnail advertisement for this episode will have the background of what we're talking about in there, so you can see it. All right. So, question number 2: favorite book.
My favorite book. Well, I'll break that up into 2. So I would say in a fiction category, there's a book by Philip Nutman that came out years ago called Wet Work. And it's about like this sort of like spy zombie novel. And it was pretty unique for its time. I mean, now we live in the age of Walking Dead, so zombies are kind of a dime a dozen. But he wrote this back in the early 90s, and it was fascinating. It was sort of like a Tom Clancy meets zombies sort of mashup, and it's something that I find myself reading every few years. And then from a nonfiction perspective, I would say With Winning in Mind by Lanny Bassam.
Okay.
It's a fantastic book. I've recommended that to so many people over the years, and I've found it life-changing as well.
Did you find an affinity for it, or an increased affinity for it because he shoots what you shoot?
I think so. But that particular book I've actually sent to friends that have never shot before or have, very little interest in shooting, because he tells you at the beginning of the book that the principles that he outlines, obviously they apply to shooting, but he says, they can work for so many other things that you're trying to do or accomplish in your life. The whole mental management thing. And I think that's so interesting and so important. And I love the example he gives you at the beginning of his book to kind of give you proof of what he's talking about with remembering people's names. Because I tried that, and then suddenly I'm great at remembering names.
It's interesting book. Because that book and he have come up on this show, I mean, definitely more than a handful of times. So
We'll probably talk about this later at some point, but I'm also one of the few active duty coaches for the Air Force Wounded Warrior program, which has nothing to do with the Wounded Warrior Project. I know they sound similar in name, but this is actual official Air Force entity for wounded warriors, both on active duty and medically retired. And that particular book, I promote to the athletes all the time, and it's so great to have them come back. I've had multiple athletes, been doing this for 6 years now, come back and say, I read that book and it's helped me so much, not only just trying to teach them in shooting, but also in their recovery.
Yeah, that's awesome. We have in my old first due, for the department, we actually have one of their, or at least a tangential organization, one of their houses for recovery when they have surgeries down here in either Bethesda or DeWitt. So they have a house out here where they kind of convalesce, and the families can hang out so they can go and see them when they're in the hospital during recovery.
Is it the Fisher House?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. They've come by the station a whole bunch of times, and we give them tours and hang out and talk to them and stuff.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, the Fisher House is a very big sponsor for the Warrior Games in general, which like every service has their own Wounded Warrior program. And what it all kind of culminates into, outside of just like the regular recovery aspects that you might run into, but the sports, the adaptive sports part of it all culminates into Warrior Games, which is sort of like a military Paralympics.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, every year Fisher House comes out during the opening ceremonies. I can't remember the guy that runs it. His name escapes me, but he'll come out and talk. And
now that you've said it, I cannot recall who he is.
If you'd asked me 5 minutes ago, I could tell you, but now I forgot.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's a pretty cool program.
Welcome to being closer to my age.
Yes. Yeah.
Number 3, and this are the third co-host who isn't here. His favorite question to ask people is, who is your favorite superhero?
It's not really a superhero, but it's probably the only comic book character that I gravitated towards when I was younger, and that's the Punisher. So, which now is, everyone and their mother has like, a little Punisher sticker on any and every little thing. I'm sure Marvel is still kind of mad about all the money they probably lost out on licensing just because it's so, ubiquitous everywhere. But the original like Marvel, like 80s and 90s character that they had for him, and I know he's been through a lot of iterations since then. I enjoyed that. And I really wanted to enjoy the Netflix series, because I kind of liked how they introduced him in Daredevil, but I couldn't get into the Netflix series. I mean, I think that I call it, what's his name, Shane. I mean, I call him Shane from Walking Dead, but John Bernthal, John Bernthal. Like, I liked him as that character, but the way they portrayed him and the stories in the series, it just didn't do it for me.
Which is sad because he actually is a pretty good actor. I just watched him on Hot Ones, where they eat progressively hotter wings while they get asked questions. We should probably start doing that, Dave. Make people eat hot wings while we ask them questions.
That's actually not a bad idea.
Just saying.
We have to overnight them so they have the ones we want them to have, though.
Because you're a shooting podcast, though, I would actually recommend that you somehow do these interviews on the range and have people shoot hotter and hotter loads and like work them up, and then to like a 500 Smith & Wesson, and they cry uncle. And
I mean, listen, the biggest one I have is a 300 Win Mag. So.
Yeah, that'll do it too.
Like you need to buy a bigger caliber. Leo.
I mean, he's not wrong.
So, speaking of hotter and hotter guns, what is your favorite gun and caliber?
My favorite gun, and I'm going to go with this a class because I have many variants of it. I'm a big fan of all the different variants, but my favorite gun is probably the MP5. I first shot an MP5 when I was 9 years old, years and years ago, because my dad was involved with some folks that all had the they were actually dealers at the time for NFA weapons. And we used to go to like machine gun shoots. And at one point, the local news station wanted to do a story on shooting. And they had me come out and shoot this MP5. So we went down to our neighbor's house, and he showed me how to take it apart and put together and shoot it. And I shot like some clay birds with it. And I was just so impressed like how accurate it was, even when I was 9 years old. And they got some footage and stuff for the local news. And just in my mind, that stuck with me to this day, is I'm just such a fan of that platform. And, it's obviously gone through a midlife improvement program in the last few years. So they're still squeaking out a little more life out of a 50-year-old plus design. But I love the MP5. And as far as the caliber, I would say 9mm, because it goes along with that. And I know that they've done MP5s in 10mm and 40 as well. But 9mm, I think, is a fantastic caliber. And I think that we're obviously seeing a resurgence of it, especially like in the law enforcement military side in the last few years, after, 40 cal was the go-to caliber for so long. And then people just like, maybe I can get, some good performance out of 9mm. And obviously people do now with improvements in manufacturing and ammo. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I can't fault you one bit. That is probably the funnest gun I have ever shot in my life. And even for being 50 years old, that thing functions way better than I do. So,
Yeah, I actually brought one to show.
ooh,
That's the funnest gun I've ever looked at.
Yeah. So
nice.
this is the B&T stock. It's a new stock again, like, midlife improvement program type stuff. But this stock's really great because I took my office out a few weeks ago to shoot, and people of different shapes and sizes and all that, and having a collapsible stock like this was a fantastic option to run, just to accommodate all those different folks. And I have the A5 stock that they did a while back as well. This is actually MP5 SD. But
yes, it is.
I will say that this particular stock, it looks good. It makes the gun look nice and kind of fun, but it's not fun to shoot. Like I enjoy like other, like the B&T stocks, or even like the old A2 stock on MP5s, shooting it. But for like range day or take pictures or whatever, this is a really nice stock. But just it's really complicated too. Like if you don't ever try to take it apart, because you'll never get it back together. Like they have special jigs and stuff like that at HK factories to be able to reassemble these things, and it's just too complex. The B&T one is nice and easy, and again, it's just has a lot more flexibility, and it's also the B&T one's easier to pull out than the A5 one that they did.
Those I tell you, when I can buy afford an MP5 and USPSA will let me shoot it, I will switch to PCC, because that is the only gun I would want to shoot PCC.
There's a guy that shoots like up at Shadowhawk that shoots an MP5.
Derek Giddings on the HK shooting team. He actually runs MP5 as well, and I've run him out at Steel Challenge and also at USPSA before. I mean, they're allowed on there, but if you're talking like like an SP5 that you want to like SBR or something like that, that probably would be one of the cheaper options to go. I got into this full bore, if you will, with a registered sear a few years ago. Some people come back from a deployment and they buy a car, and a car lasts a few years, and then they trade it in or whatever. And I decided that I was going to buy a machine gun, and I'm glad I did, because at the time I thought the price was already outrageous as it was.
Right.
And I'm like, but I also was looking at the trajectory of the pricing going up since 2011, even before that. And I thought, if I don't jump in this now, I'm never going to be able to afford this. And so
you should really talk to my wife.
Yeah.
I've tried that logic before.
So it's gone up, I think, about 18 grand more than what I paid already. It's
like Bitcoin.
Yeah, it is like Bitcoin. Yeah. I mean, I'll never forget. My dad was a dealer. He was not I'd use the term class 3 dealer, but he didn't sell NFA type stuff. And he would tell me when I was a kid, when you go out to these machine gun shoots, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I want to get a machine gun. We should get a machine gun." And he goes, "No, it's just a waste of money, and it takes too much ammo." And he's like, "They're so expensive now." And I look at the prices back in the 90s. Sometimes you see ads and stuff like that of what NFA stuff was going for, and it's just that would have been an amazing investment.
Do you remember when gas was $1?
Right.
It's like that.
Yeah.
Burgers were 10 cents.
I tell you, Robert, I was at Quantico in the early 90s, and we had an HK rep come out. He brought out an MSG 90, a PSG 1. We already had MP5s in our cage in the armory.
Right.
But he also brought out a PDW.
Oh, yeah.
And at 100 yards, so I'm standing on the 100-yard line. I'm like, all right, hold on, I'm going to cough. I'm like, all right, short barrel. I'm going to aim high. Now, we were shooting at an NRA 6-foot by 6-foot cardboard target. So I'm like, I'm going to aim at the top because I'm not really sure where. So I was aiming about 3 to 4 feet, I guess about 3 feet above the center. And I fired a bunch of rounds. I looked up and they were all right where I aimed. I was like, well, maybe I should have just held straight on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
At
I
100
was
yards
surprised.
with a K, because I have a K and a PDW as well. And it's easy. You can hit, steel targets, body size targets at 100 yards with them. People just don't think about it because, it's a pistol caliber. But beyond that, beyond 100 yards, 100 meters, like I wouldn't have a lot of confidence in the platform. But anything, working within those ranges, I think would be just fine. There's a course that I've done several of, and I'm going to go do it here again in a few weeks with a company called Teufelschoen Tactical. That he runs a advanced MP5 operators course, and that's one of the drills too. Is they stack you up at the 100-yard line, and you work back every 10 meters, shooting like as a team, and just continuing to hit the same target. And then when you get back to the 100-yard line, you're still hitting that same target. But he does that as like a psychological drill to show you that it is possible. It's no problem.
Like a bounding Overwatch type of a.
Oh no, not like that. So
exercise?
you just line up and it peel off. You shoot, peel off. Once you get the hit, you peel
Okay.
off. And
I gotcha.
yeah, it's a great drill, and that opened my eyes too. Because if he would have started you out at the 100-yard line and said, "Hey, hit that steel," I think most people would have been intimidated or wouldn't. I couldn't do that. But by you starting out close, you keep hitting the same target as you're working back. It builds a lot of confidence. And also, I do use the guns competitively too. I'm shooting a submachine gun match next weekend in Red Brush, Indiana, or Red Brush Range, I think is what it's called.
Wow. I'm shooting one next weekend too in CMP in Talladega.
Nice.
But it's not a subgun.
Yeah. When we met, I told you that finding subgun matches is a little bit hard. This weekend, of course, in Knob Creek in West Point, Kentucky, they're having the very last big machine gun shoot ever at Knob Creek, and they always have matches there too. And that was my first experience shooting it in a match about 5 years ago, doing that. And then when I lived down in Georgia, down in Florida actually, or close to the border of Florida, I was able to shoot pretty regularly submachine gun matches out there. There's I think it's Port Malabar is the range on the eastern part of Florida. They have regular subgun matches, and they're great. They're a lot of fun.
Wow. Yeah, that would be, those would be fantastic. Now, when we were talking and we talked about Knob Creek, you told me why this was the last one, and I didn't know why. So if you would, let the audience know why this is Knob Creek's last big hurrah.
Well, it'd be a bit of conjecture on my part, because I don't know if they've officially come out and said this is why we're stopping. But just talking to people in the community, from what I've heard, is that it just has become too cumbersome to run every year. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. That it's become more of a beast than they're willing to run. And I think that maybe also they're looking at it from the aspect of how much effort they have to put into it, and they run that as a normal range, from what I understand. Every year or day to day as it is. So they probably make plenty of money just doing that, just being a range in that area, and want to focus on that.
It's like an icon, though. It's sad to see it, even though I've never participated. It's kind of sad to see it go. It'd be like, Camp Perry's national matches going away.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me. And again, this is just my opinion, but it wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't come back in like 5 years or something, kind of like rock bands when they're like, our final tour, we're going away, and everyone rushes to it because it's like, oh, it's their final tour. Knob Creek says, hey, this is the last shoot we're ever going to do. I can almost guarantee you that, they have sellout weekends going, or a sellout weekend for that, saying that. So it wouldn't surprise me if someone at their company later decides that, hey, let's bring it back.
That would be good. It just seems like we're losing more stuff than we're gaining. So I hate to see anything go away. So what match were you shooting today?
I was shooting a USPSA level 1 match here on Quantico.
Oh, okay. You're here at Quantico.
Yeah.
All right.
And today I shot in the limited category, because I learned just a few days ago that I can actually shoot my BP9 SK with a light in the limited category. The last time I checked this about a year ago, I couldn't. So I had to shoot this, or I've been shooting this both in Steel Challenge and USPSA. in the open class because it has a light on it. And that was really the only class that I could find that I could run a light on it without having like weights or whatever inside of it. But the rules now say that you can have in limited category a light. And you're probably going to ask me, well, why don't you just run production? Because production allows lights now too. And that's a great question. And unfortunately, USPSA on their rules for production say that you must use a production approved gun. And wouldn't you know it, the VP9, the VP9L, the long slide version, are both approved variants to use. The VP9SK, the subcompact model, is not. So, of course, they do offer the option for you to apply to try to get something approved that's not on the list. But the USPSA and Steel Challenge stuff that I do a lot of it, but it's just more cross training for me. So I'm not so like, oh, I've got to, I'm so into this and I'm here to, dominate the field or anything like that. In fact, I specifically was looking for something that wasn't race gun related because I already come from a sport that is very specialized, and we have a lot of, very special like race, well, not really race, but, very specialized gear, leather jacket and our pleather. Well, it's canvas. I guess it's a canvas is kind of the material it's made out of, and special sights and all that stuff. And I brought today my air rifle because I don't have my small bore available, unfortunately. It's actually getting rebarreled at the moment, so I don't have anything to show you in that regard.
All right, hang on to that because we're about to start going that way. Because my next question was going to be, I want to go back in time, and so you shot in high school,
right,
on a rifle team. Did you shoot in college?
I did, and it was unusual because I went to Texas Christian University in Fort Worth.
Oh, TCU,
and
that's why.
If you know anything about TCU, you might know that they're very famous for having a women's only rifle team.
I have heard that.
And I had the pleasure of belonging to a way long ago defunct club now that used to shoot there on Wednesday nights. There used to be like a league, a Fort Worth air rifle, or I guess it was rifle leagues. I think we shot some small bore there too, but it was a league that would go on every Wednesday night. And a friend of mine that was a shooter in high school, she would drive me there like every Wednesday night while we were in high school, and we'd go shoot there. And that kind of, I think that sort of influenced my decision to go to TCU because I knew that they had a range, and I knew the lay of the land there. But yeah, it's a conundrum, right? You get there and you can't shoot because you're the wrong sex. So what do? So you
identify as the other.
No comment.
Yeah.
So
you were there too early.
I created a thing called the TCU Rifle Club, and that suited my purposes throughout all 4 years of being in school. We got a little bit of funding from the school, and I was able to shoot there or have a purpose to be there on the range to train, and the coach was fine with that. It took a bit of time though, because to keep the club going, I'd have to bring in recruits and try to show them the ropes, and it was kind of a balance of making sure I had time to practice, but then trying to show some new people the sport as well. But yeah, that's how I did it.
Almost like being the coach and getting your practice in as well. Yeah.
But it was a great experience.
So it sounds like you grew up in that area too then.
I did. I'm originally from Garland, Texas, which is the home of scandalous country star Leanne Rimes. And the cartoon show King of the Hill is based on Garland.
There we go.
Dad, can I put a gun rack on my bike?
I was born in Dallas County Memorial Hospital, which is no longer there.
I have been to Texas.
That's a start.
I got stuck at an airport there once. My buddy had to come pick me up. Thankfully, I knew somebody in Texas.
Yeah.
I was on a flight back from New Mexico. And it was when that guy conflagrated himself at Southwest, the tower. Like he burned himself alive in Chicago, like the hub of Southwest. So they shut down all flight. This was a couple of years back.
Okay.
So they shut down all the flights. So I'm sitting there in the airport in Texas, and I'm like, it's 3 a.m. I don't think I'm getting a flight anytime soon. So I'm like, hey, Sean, can you come pick me up? He's like, I just got off of work. He's a police officer. It's like, I just got off of work. I'll be there in 10. And then they're like,
Perfect
your
timing.
next flight's at 6. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a 2-hour nap. And then can you drive me back to the airport?
That's a friend. That's
That
a
Yeah.
I love. I mean, I am his daughter's godfather, so
oh, okay.
if he had
That
not have
helps.
been pretty upset, and her Christmas gift would have been horrible. That's not true. Love you, Lenore.
All right, so you went to TCU, you shot there, and then I assume you joined the Air Force at the end of your university time.
Right, right. So after summer of 2001, I commissioned into the Air Force. And prior to that, I had been in contact with a guy that, as far as I knew, he was the Air Force shooting team, or he was like the focal point for the Air Force shooting team. I found his name from someone else that had retired out that knew. And I was very confused about the process at the time because I didn't understand in the service, like how you can go and do assignments for other services. Or have jobs, working for another service. Because at the time, said he was in the Air Force shooting team, but he was like the coach at West Point. And I was like, I was trying to wrap my brain around that. But it was just one of those things that he was able to get an assignment. They were looking for an active duty coach, and I guess it was open to all services. And he went and took a job at West Point being the coach. And I kept in touch with him, and I was very fortunate for my first assignment. I was based in Colorado Springs, which is where the Olympic Training Center is located, that does this style of special shooting that I've been doing. And Doug Clark was his name. He flew out to one of the big airgun matches they had out there. And it was great to finally kind of, put a name with a face and meet him. And by the end of that match, he threw a hat on my, like a shooting team hat on my bag. And that was it. I was in the team. So.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
But you didn't do ROTC in college, though.
I did.
Oh, okay.
But ROTC has nothing to do with shooting competitively
right.
in college. Now, I think there are some unaffiliated or loosely affiliated, shooting teams. I think the Air Force Academy even has a like a combat pistol shooting team or something like that. But by and large, like the ROTC program has nothing to do with competitive shooting, whereas JROTC does.
Right.
And that's more too, because like when I started in JROTC, we were shooting Smallbore and air rifle, and within a few years they got rid of all the Smallbores. We only used them for like turkey shoots. My high school had turkey shoots in the school. It's pretty cool. But now I think most JROTC programs have just kind of have gone to the Sporter platform for a lot of their competitive shooting. And there still are some like they call precision air teams out there, but for the most part, it's Sporter. But I'm just glad they still have shooting teams in some high schools.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Could use a few more. I noticed when I was doing research for talking to the Navy action shooting team, Annapolis has shooting teams. The Academy does. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. All the service academies have, except for the Coast Guard, I think, have a shooting team, like an NCAA level shooting team. And I'll tell you that there's a disconnect when I go out and shoot small bore matches or even air rifle matches, and people see me, wearing an Air Force shooting team shirt, and they look at me and they're used to, they're used to collegiate shooters, because large majority of people that do this style of shooting anymore, at least in America, are collegiate shooters or high school. Excuse me. And they look at me as oh, he's in the Air Force. He must be at the Air Force Academy. And I can't tell you how many people still come to me at these matches and like, oh, you're at the Air Force Academy. So I'm grateful that I still look like a college student, I guess, to some folks. But it's so weird every time having to explain that. Like, no, I'm about to retire from the Air Force. I've been in like 20 years. Versus like going to Steel Challenge, USPSA matches and all that. People don't ever ask me if I've been, in college, or if I'm still a collegiate shooter. They're just like, they just accept me. Oh, you're with the Air Force. Oh, okay. It's a funny dichotomy between the two disciplines.
Yeah. Wow. So he throws a hat on your gear. You're now an Air Force. You're on the Air Force team.
Right.
But I'm assuming at this point, a brand new second lieutenant.
Right.
So where is your first duty station, and was that even convenient for shooting?
Yeah, it was Colorado Springs. As I said,
okay.
that's where like the Olympic Training Center was.
Oh,
I was at
okay.
Peterson Air Force Base, now Space Force Base, I believe. And it was just a great location to be in because obviously you can be stationed some places that it would be near impossible to find a range that does that sort of specialized shooting. So it was very, very lucky to have a place, and I could go and train at the Olympic Training Center, and I trained at the Air Force Academy as well while I was up there. And it was just great to have, again, that opportunity to have the right setup or the right configuration of the ranges for what I needed to do.
Are you trying to say Minot doesn't have a plethora of ranges like that?
See, you laugh about that, but I was in LA earlier this week for retirement for a buddy of mine that's on the Air Force shooting team. And he actually got his start when he was up there. And he got his start because he went to a library one day, bored, and found a book on position rifle shooting. And he just fell into it. And I'm still to this day baffled, like how someone does that in someplace so desolate that doesn't probably have this style of shooting like Minot. But then he kind of linked up with a right guy that loaned him out some gear, and he fell in love with it, and has been doing it ever since. And even now that he's retiring, he's going to keep shooting this style of shooting. He just loves it, love of the sport. But yes, at a library in Minot.
Wow. Well, I guess I should have made a joke about Minot.
What's that?
They have libraries there?
They do. They do. I don't know if anyone under 30 knows what those facilities are anymore, but they do have those.
That's where people go and use the internet, right?
It used to be, but now everyone's got internet on their phone. So I don't know, like internet cafes, do they still even exist? Maybe some parts of Europe.
Cafes.
Yeah. So you and I were talking as well. Now you spent some time in Europe. And how were you able to get your rifles? Because as we've discussed on the other episode with the other guys on the action shooting team, the equipment, the guns, everything are yours. You have to supply all of that. So you have to now take your personal weapons to Europe, and now you have to travel in Europe with your personal weapons, or rifles, which I would think is probably not the easiest thing to do.
Well, it was actually easier than you thought. So when I got an assignment to Belgium in 2003, I wanted to take my guns with me because I knew that there was a lot of this style of international rifle, like, going on in Europe. And I'm like, wow, I'm going to the Mecca of shooting. This is going to be fantastic. So I knew there, there's a will, there's a way. And around this summer of 2003, I contacted the State Department to ask, like, hey, I want to take my rifles with me to Belgium. How do I do that? Because the form letter I got for my orders just said, no firearms. And I'm like, that can't be right. There's got to be a way. So I called the State Department, and they're like, oh, yeah, just have them send over with your household goods. I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, yeah, that's all you have to do. So I had my household goods picked up, and then I think I ended up putting in my whole baggage, which to the State Department, they said doesn't matter. So the whole baggage is like baggage, like bigger stuff that you want to keep with you up until right before you PCS or change duty assignments. But maybe it's too big for you to put in a suitcase, to take with you. So I think I was still shooting matches up until like a few weeks before I left for Europe. So I kept my rifles with me, and then I had someone come out to the house in Texas because I had gone down there to drop my car off and visit my folks, and they took my rifles. I took my on-shoots, which is my Smallbore. It's a 1918 and a 1913 stock. I took a HK USC 45, which is kind of this bastardization of the UMP that they did. Now it's kind of been reintroduced, or at least they found some old stock that they put back out there. And I took a 10 Foglio, or it's EA Witness 45, which is a copy of CZ 75 style, but in 45. And I took a Kel-Tec 32 and a Mossberg 12 gauge. So those were the guns that I brought over with me into Europe. So I fly into Europe, and my I'm probably on station for about a month, and then I get a notification that my hold baggage had arrived, but there was a problem. They took they found my guns in it, and they they said the gendarmerie, which is like the Belgian federal police, had confiscated them. And I was like, oh, they confiscated them. Well, the State Department told me it was totally cool to bring my guns over here. And obviously I'm kind of freaking out now. I'm like, well, am I ever going to see these things again? Which is why I didn't bring any more guns than I did, because I was like, you're always rolling the dice a little bit. I probably would have been most sad losing that on shoes than anything else. But so what ended up happening was the gendarmerie said, hey, these arrived by the air, so we had to confiscate them. And I said, well, what if they had arrived with my household goods by ship? And they're like, oh, that's no problem. I still to this day don't understand that, but that's just one of the oddities of Belgium and the way they have their laws set up. But they said, hey, you can apply for the license to be able to have these in Belgium. And I said, okay, well, how do I do that? And they said, well, you need to have an endorsement by a shooting club saying that you're a shooter like in good standing and that you're not crazy and whatever. So at the time, there was a guy, used to be an Army shooter, and he was on the Army marksmanship unit for years. I think he might have even gone to the Olympics at some point. His name is Dave Johnson. I don't know if you know that name, but Dave Johnson at the time was running USA Shooting, which is the governing body for international rifle, Olympic-style rifle in America. And he knew me from my time in Colorado Springs and like shooting at Fort Benning and whatnot. And so I, asked him to give me a letter to endorse me to do this. And so he sent me a letter of endorsement, and I filled out the paperwork. Basically, like I had to prove that I owned, all the guns. So I had to go dig up receipts and all that. And I filed the paperwork. And about 2 or 3 months later, I was able to go pick up my rifles and the pistols. And then I was able to start shooting at a club in Tongeren, which is like the city that I lived in Belgium on the eastern part of the country. And that was a really interesting experience.
Okay. Why was it interesting?
Because they had a bar in their range. And then I have since found that every range in Europe has a bar. Now you're probably thinking like, people would lose their minds in America if there was a bar in a range. Although like I understand now in Dallas at Frisco, there's like some fancy gun club there that they actually have like a bar and a cigar lounge as part of their facility. But in Europe, it's kind of more mixed together. Like you're not actually, the bar is not physically on the range. You have to walk outside into like the lobby area. And yeah, you can sit there and drink. And the catch is, of course, is like you think, you don't want to handle a gun after you've been drinking. So they don't want someone to come in there that's had a few and they're going to shoot. It's nothing like that at all. Everyone, respects the system and the way they have it set up. But yeah, you can drink after you finish shooting. And I think it's a great concept. And if America wasn't so risk adverse, I think that'd be great to see that in America too. Again, responsibly, to be able to do that after you're shooting. Right. But I found that it was common throughout Europe was drinking. Bars in ranges. My wife is actually, I met her in Belgium, and she's a teacher. Her school actually had a bar for the teachers, which I'm sure you can imagine that would cause a lot of consternation if that was in America too. But also makes sense. It does. They would have. At the end of the day, you might need a drink. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm really starting to like Europe.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to move to Frisco, Texas or Belgium.
Yeah.
Or we could trade.
So I got hooked up with people in the shooting community out there. And in my town, they didn't have any Americans. I mean, the place that I worked at in NATO in the eastern part of Belgium, there were only 18 Americans, and there were 200 total international personnel from about 16 different nations. And none of the Americans, we didn't live together. It wasn't like a little, like Ramstein, there's like K-Town where there's like all these Americans. It's like the largest mix of Americans outside of America. Well, where I lived, there were none. So my neighbors had never met an American, there was none of that joining together. So luckily though, because I was an oddity or something new, people were trying to gravitate towards me and ask me questions and yeah, I got linked up into like the shooting league of Belgium and started shooting there, training several nights a week in Tongeren. And then I found a way to Germany. So I found a club in Germany that was just over the border, about 45 minutes from where I lived. And those folks were serious shooters. Like they were really like into the science of shooting, and they were able to help me improve my game so much. And it was just such a great time to go there and shoot. And that actually paved the way for me to go to Germany later with my guns.
So do you think because they were so serious, do you think that had any effect on your shooting and improved it any, or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Anytime you're around a good competition, you're going to improve as well. It's going to bring your game up. And I was shooting great and just, learning. So I felt like the time I was at TCU, I was a little bit rudderless in that I didn't really have a coach. I mean, the TCU rifle team at the time did have a coach, but he came from a high power background. He didn't really understand small bore and the air rifle and the nuances of it. And so getting to Germany and then learning so much more about the sport, it improved my shooting so much more. And then it reached a point in 2006, I became the first non-Belgian and the first American to ever win the Master of Flanders Prone Shooting Series, which is kind of like the Masters in golf, but in Belgium. So you go to all these different competitions throughout the year, and you have to place within, first, second, thirds, and I guess they do a rack and stack by the end of the year of like who had the highest medal count. And I won that for 2006. And then I repeated that. Actually, I take that back. I won it in 2005 and I repeated it again in 2006.
Wow. Good job.
So
now for the audience, can you walk us through what one of those matches looked like?
Yes. So the Master of Flanders series is based on prone shooting for small bore. So it's a 22 caliber rifle, and it looks like a space gun. So I brought my air rifle again, but it does have some similarities to a small bore rifle. But the air rifles themselves, when you shoot that, they're a little more standardized as far as how you can change things out. So like my small bore has like this big specialized butt hook that comes on it. And is adjustable. Whereas like on the air rifle, this is only adjustable like side to side or up and down. And then the sights actually don't have my rear diopter on here, but I use the same rear diopter for air rifle and for small bore. And it's a dual polarizer and dual color filter. I like to shoot in yellow and like when I'm shooting outside, and then inside a lot of times I shoot in orange.
And you can put that in your sight.
What's that?
And you make the sight the color you want.
Yes. So you're only allowed iron sights for international style shooting. NRA is something completely different. We can talk about that later. But for international shooting, it has to be iron sights. But you are allowed to adjust the polarization, which is very important for some ranges that you go and shoot at. Maybe the lighting's not so great. I mean, in high school, we used to shoot in gyms all the time, and the lighting in there is terrible. And so the polarizer can actually help you to adjust, to bring a little more light into your eyes, so you're not like squinting, looking like a, a murky target downrange.
And really help with the contrast with your front sight post too, I imagine.
Absolutely.
Or whatever you're using up front.
Absolutely. And the color filters on it, that's really interesting to find, what color does your eye prefer, and sometimes it's based on the time of day, the conditions of the range. And I think about 8 or 9 different colors that I can work through. And that's really fun, because I've been to some ranges where, my standard go-to color just doesn't work. It's like this, I'm not seeing this very well. And you can adjust that. And I will say that I'm very fortunate. An incredible gift the Air Force gave me a few years ago, or early on in my career, is I had PRK done at the Air Force Academy. Again, I didn't go to the academy, but when you're at Peterson, you can go to the other Air Force facilities in the area. And at the time, they offered PRK eye surgery, because I used to wear glasses, and I came out with 20/10 vision. So at a certain point, my vision kept improving after the surgery. I thought I was going to see through walls. It was getting so good. So,
like Terminator.
Yeah. So I don't have to wear it, because some guys wear a monocle. So, it's like their
Mr.
prescription
Peanut.
Or whatever. I'm sorry.
Like Mr. Peanut.
Like Mr. Peanut. Yeah. It's a sexy sport, let me tell you, especially when we're wearing the sweatband and all that.
I'm digging it.
Stuff. So
you haven't turned me off yet.
Yeah. But then on top of that, so I've described the rifle, but the other part of that is you have to wear a shooting jacket at a minimum. You wear shooting pants as well. Although now I think under the international rules, they might have done away with the need for shooting pants, at least for prone. But You wear a shooting jacket, and normally you have like a sweatshirt on underneath that. And then you're strapped into the rifle. You've got a sling that connects to the rifle. And the sling, if you've got it set up right, is doing the majority of the work. So about 85% of your hold is going to be coming through, a proper balance of weight distribution between both elbows, and then having the sling do it. Because if you're using muscle to hold up that rifle over a sequence of 60 shots, I don't care, if you're Arnold, your arm is going to fatigue, and you're going to start dropping shots. So you've got to let the equipment do its job. And then, you're shooting a bullseye that's about 10 millimeters in length, which is like 0.4 inches, I think.
Yep. 0.4.
And
Correct.
0.4. And then you shoot that 60 times. You shoot sighters prior to that. But once you go from sighters to the match, you can't go back and shoot any more sighters. So
is it unlimited sighters, or do you have a certain number and then you declare, or?
Yeah, it's unlimited, and then you declare.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, you asked about the conditions, or the ranges, and the ranges in Belgium, every one of them was different. It all had their own unique aspects to them. And I'll never forget, I shot in one range that to this day, I still have nightmares about it sometimes. Like, it reminded me of hell, because it was dark. It was like they had some sort of insulation that they had put into the range that made it look like a cave, sort of. And it was like,
wow,
the material itself just looked like soot almost. And it was so hot in that range. They didn't have air conditioning, and it was like July, I think, was when I did this particular one. And even the lighting down range was like this bright, like a tan sort of lighting and stuff like that. So just in my mind, it reminded me of hell, especially with how hot it was. Because when you're wearing the leathers and the sweatshirt and all that stuff, the closest thing I can equate it to, actually, I'll steal something from my teammate that just retired. He used to say that it's like taking the SATs, wearing a bunch of sweatshirts, and a sauna. And that's
very enjoyable.
That's uncomfortable. Are you sure you weren't just shooting in a cave with lights in it?
It may have been, but
a grotto, as they call it over there.
It could have been, but they had a fantastic beer, and I fell in love with a great beer that they had at that particular range called Palm Royale, which is very difficult to find in the U.S. But I remember that part of it. That was the enjoying part, or the enjoyable part of it. But shooting at that particular match, which I won, but it was just grueling.
That sounds a lot like, high power. That's what I shot. Same thing. Heavy shooting coat, sweatshirts, sling, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. Don't forget the
sweatband. So that part. Well, and that's what I was going to ask. I'm glad you said that. When I shoot USPSA in the summertime, I still wear my headband. Or sweatband. I know I look goofy.
You have different follicular issues than.
But I don't like sweat in my eye. I found it is
some
not
of us have
conducive to shooting at all.
I'm right there with you, and I sweat. I've always sweated a lot, so I'm like a 2 sweatband kind of guy at a lot of matches now, and I'll try to hide it under my hat, but yeah, I have to, and you don't like sweat in your eye. The thing that really gets me is if I'm shooting not an international match, but like USPSA or Steel Challenge or something like that, is getting sweat on my glasses.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a no-go for me. So I did a few weeks ago, just to show that I do different things besides this international shooting. I did actually a 5K run and gun down in North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
And it's running and shooting, and there was like obstacles in between. You had to put on a tourniquet and carry a 130-pound stretcher for a quarter mile with a teammate.
I feel like this is an urban competition here.
No,
running through the street, shooting at people, grabbing.
Yeah.
You may have committed a felony.
No. It was strange. Like, at some points you're walking on your public roads, with your rifle and your gun and everything like that. I was like, North Carolina, baby. Okay. This is how they do it.
I think you were on a shooting spree.
It was an amazing competition. It was so much fun. There were snakes, and you had to wade through pond water. But I had to mentally psych myself up before doing that I fully expected that at some point I would have sweat just coming down my glasses and have to work through it. So, we talked about with winning in mind. I'm like, I'll get through this. It's fine if there's going to be sweat all over my glasses. And as luck would have it, I didn't have one bead of sweat on my glasses. Now I was like soaked, drenched, when I was done with the match. But that's an incredible thing. Now I'm actually going to go back, and next month they're going to do night ops. So it's a 4K night ops in white light. I'm pretty excited about that.
Did you
Those
find
sound
out
like
about this
exciting.
through an email?
No. So
someone you've never met before?
no. So a
Okay.
guy.
Listen, I just want to make sure I'm protecting your retirement at this point.
Right.
I'm looking out for you.
It's legitimate competition. And the funny thing was, I talked a buddy into going out there with me, and I couldn't understand. So there obviously are people that are runners, and there are people that are shooters, but those groups don't always mingle together. And you know what I'm talking about. There's sometimes it just doesn't happen. And people, my buddy that I had known through some training courses that I'd been to one, and he posted about it on Facebook, as we all learn about things, right? Earlier this year. And I thought, oh, that looks really cool. I want to do that. And he's like, well, you better sign up as soon as the tickets go on sale because it sells out quickly. And I couldn't understand that. I'm like, it sells out quickly? Like, again, like shooters, runners, not a lot of people that do both. And I'm like, and it was in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina. And I'm just kind of thinking, like, what is this? Are there really that many fit people that like to shoot, that would do this kind of thing? And it wasn't until my buddy and I got down to the site, and he's reading off a text from his buddy that had kind of known about this match. He goes, oh yeah, you're down there with all the operator types. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I realized Fort Bragg was like, an hour away.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That explains
it.
Now
it all becomes clear.
Like similar or like adjacent to like the tactical games that they put on. Because they have a lot of those where it's like, oh, I'm going to carry a 60-pound ruck and climb through things that could hurt me and then shoot at stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was that. I mean, it was definitely that. You're running for a little bit and then you stop, and they at least for the team match, they tell you, okay, one person's going to shoot pistol on this stage, one person's going to shoot rifle, and then I remember the very first stage out the gate, I had to shoot pistol at several different pistol targets. And then my buddy could finally jump out of this truck and start engaging rifle targets. And they're like, once your buddy does, he starts shooting, you need to go back to the truck and pull this body out of the truck. It's like a big, dummy or whatever, and drag that, 30 feet this way. And then if your buddy's still not finished shooting, then you can help him, engage those targets. So right out the gate, they're already, smoking you, and you're working hard. It was great.
It actually sounds super fun.
Was this a TCCC class? Is that really where you were at?
No.
Okay.
It's a company called The Gun Run. And I think their website's like thegunrun.us. This is not an endorsement, of course. And you can find out, when they've got other matches coming up. And my buddy, once we had finished the match and we were driving back home, he starts, kind of looking into it a little further. It turns out there are gun runs throughout the nation. There's like a whole community of people that do this. We even found out about one in Michigan, like in February or March. That is Red Dawn themed.
Wolverines.
Yeah. But I'm thinking like Michigan, and in the winter. No, I'm good.
See, now you said that, I will absolutely dress like Patrick Swayze and go do that. Don't even care. I'll do horrible. I have a shirt that says it's an American flag and it says I don't do cardio because these colors don't run. But I'll still do it.
Yeah. Well, I will say for that match too, something that unique my buddy and I did, because we thought a lot of people would be running ARs, and most did, is that I ran a Belgian FN FS2000, which is the Bullpup. I don't have it handy here to show you. And my buddy ran a CZ Bren 2, which was pretty new on the market. So we were determined to try and run something different out there. And I will say that the FS2000 performed beautifully.
That shoots, what's the caliber?
It's 5.56.
Okay.
Because it's the standard rifle now of the Belgian military. So it had to be, a NATO caliber. So yeah, it's 5.56.
I couldn't remember if they like not the 5.7, but it was like 5.4 or something like that.
Well, you might be thinking of the 5.7, which is for the PS90 or P90, and the 5.7 pistol.
There you go.
And then HK's got the 4.6 millimeter for the MP7.
The MP7,
pretty much unobtainium in the US.
Yeah.
Do you like Bullpups?
I do. In fact, if so many ranges weren't adverse to you shooting 5.7, you'd probably find me shooting a 5.7 pistol and a PS90. I've got a PS90 as well. And it's a fun gun to shoot. The problem is a lot of ranges just don't want you shooting it, because of denting up steel.
Mm-hmm.
Paper targets, it'd be fine, but I haven't found a match yet that is like, yay, bring your 5.7 out here. In fact, there's even a local indoor range here. It has a big sign in front of their door before you go in. It's like, no 5.7. I'm like, I guess he had a bad experience with it eating up his backstop.
I get it. It's a great round though.
It is. But to your question about bullpups, yeah, bullpups are fun. Obviously they've got a stigma when it comes to the trigger, a little mushy or not always the greatest triggers, but I was very impressed with how the FS 2000 performed when I went out to that match, and I purposely took it too because I've had that gun for years, but there haven't been a lot of opportunities to take it out and shoot. Other than like you take some friends out and like, oh, this is they call it the was it the Halo gun or the Starship Troopers gun because the way it looks and all that. But I was determined to actually try it out, and the gun for the countries that have adopted it. One of the things that's been unique about it is that it offers really good insulation from the elements. So you'll find it actually in some Middle Eastern countries in use because it blocks out sand, or it keeps sand out really well, which is just a kind of a unique property of it that you don't find in other firearms.
That is interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can see that. So what
so
about
you probably
your
want to ask me like about Germany, right? Like how did I move from Germany? Because that to the credit of my other teammates that had come on the show previously, which you've kind of alluded to this, but we don't get together collectively as a team every year and high five each other and get to know each other. So when I meet people that say that they're on the Air Force shooting team, I'm like, I believe you. That's
good for
very
you.
awesome. Yeah. I know. Well, the biggest strength the International Rifle has had since I've been in was about 7 folks, and now we're down to 2, myself and one other as of this week, with another guy retiring. Well, he doesn't retire till January, but he's pretty much done. But yeah, we don't get together. We don't know each other. And I know that I think it was the captain had made a comment about, there's no one shooting in Europe really, or it's hard to. And I would say that generally speaking, that's true. But I guess I was the exception to the rule because I did plenty of shooting in Germany. However, I will say that the way that I introduced my guns into Germany was a different experience than a lot of other people have had, because I already had my European Union weapons firearms pass, which allowed me to go to like shoot competitions in Denmark and Luxembourg and France. Make sure you ask me about France, please. I was going all around Europe when I was in Belgium shooting, and then when I got orders to go to Spingdalen, I was like, well, I'm going to keep shooting. I'm going to keep doing this, and I contacted the Army Provost office that handled like Americans having guns, or American military having guns in Germany. And I was in talks with him way before I even stepped foot in Germany, because I wanted to explain, this is what I'm doing. This is what I already have. And they're like, okay, well, you'll have to reapply for a German license and then reapply for a European Union firearms pass through Germany. But in the meantime, like you're covered because you already have the existing documentation for these weapons. And so I went through the process and I applied. And one of the things that, at least at that time, and I can't speak for how it is today, I would imagine it's probably somewhat still similar, but I can't speak. I mean, this is more than 14 years ago when I did this, but there was a requirement at the time that you had to shoot in Germany 12 times in 1 year. And at the club, you would have to go to a club and basically use like a club gun to shoot. And then you could apply for your German weapons pass once you had those 12 times like stamped in a little book and all that. Well, because I'd already been training in Germany when I lived in Belgium, I went to the club I'd been shooting at, and they're like, yeah, we'll stamp a book for you. You're here every Tuesday and Thursday night, of course. So that was great. We stamped a book covering all the times I'd shot in a year's period. I applied for my paperwork through the German government, and then I got my German weapons pass, and then I also got my European Union firearms pass through Germany. So that's how I ended up doing that. And
they're so efficient, the Germans.
Yeah. And so and then I just kept shooting in Germany. I found a little club near Spingdalen that I'd shoot at. And there is a lot of confusion about that process. I almost had a boss try to get me arrested because, well, you know, when I moved over, I got detailed to 6 months to a task force at Ramstein. And that's where I was applying for my paperwork when I was at Ramstein. And there was a requirement on the Army paperwork that would go up to the German government that said that the first 05 in your chain would have to approve. Well, my boss, Beckett Spangdahlem, was an 04, so he wouldn't have worked. So I was happy. I was like, well, I have a boss in this task force that's an 05. And so I sent my paperwork up to her. And I put in the email like, hey, this is the situation, and I've been coordinating with the Army Provost office. You know, I've had my guns in Europe for 4 years now. I'm just basically transferring the paperwork to Germany. I thought I had logically laid it out, and I'd met this boss a few times, so I thought she was cool. In retrospect, I probably should have, really kind of like eased her into it, like, sat down, had some coffee, and explained to her like, this is what I'm doing or whatever. Because she ends up giving it to one of her folks that works in the front office. And I don't know who he called, but he called some German police official that he knew. And the German police official's like, no, you can't own guns in Germany as an American. It's impossible. It's forbidden. And so that's all her guy channeled back up to her was that, okay, this guy is, illegally bringing guns into Germany. And then she ended up calling my boss at the time and saying that, hey, this guy you put on the task force, he's smuggling guns into Europe. He's your problem. You got to take care of it.
God.
And
Interpol called.
Yeah. So, but my boss at the time back in Spangdahlem, he's always very relaxed, and even to this day. And he called me and he's like, hey, are you smuggling guns into Germany? I'm like, no. Because I'd spoken to him before I even left and told him, I'm there for a shooting team. I've got my guns here and I'm going to file for the paperwork and all this. So he knew what was up, but he just starts laughing. He's like, yeah, well, I just got a call that you're smuggling guns into Europe, and I was told you're my problem. So I was like, no, sir, we're good. So he was able to explain to my task force boss that, everything I'm doing is legitimate, and I didn't have to go to jail. So.
Wow.
That would have been awkward.
Well, it was awkward when, I'm on that task force for like, a weekend or whatever. And the commander there is already trying to get me arrested. So, yeah.
Friends forever.
I do hear they serve beer in German prisons, though.
They just might. They just might.
Probably not the good stuff, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even bad German beer is better than like Coors Light.
Right.
Not a sponsor at all.
At all.
Yeah.
When I was in Germany, I was training. I was shooting equal amounts of like air rifle and small bore, and specializing in prone. I mean, I did shoot some 3-position. I did 3-position in college. I did 3-position in high school. But as you get older, like you just don't have time to train adequately 3 positions anymore. So I've specialized in prone. But I actually qualified. I became the first American to ever qualify for the German Nationals in air rifle in 2009. But as luck would have it, the actual date of the the German championships that year happened to fall on the day my wife and I got married. So I wasn't able to shoot that.
I feel like she would have understood.
Yeah, that's right. It was the day after our wedding, which I knew I would not be in any standing the day after my wedding to handle a gun. So
I mean, you've done all that training in European places where they have beer afterwards. Come on.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But he usually drinks the beer after he shoots, not before. That's the difference.
Listen, logic does not apply here.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. Like, you're smuggling in like an air rifle. Were they really worried that you were going to take over the German government? Was that like, oh, be careful, this American is bringing this little pew pew? Like,
well, you joke about that, and that's something too. To the point, I'm glad you mentioned that about shooting in Europe, especially if someone was like in the military that wanted to shoot. At least in Germany and in Belgium, you could go there as an American military and you could shoot air rifle or air pistol, and you wouldn't require a license. In fact, the competition style air rifles and air pistols that are out there, it's probably not going to come up in the camera there, but there is actually a little F mark right here that's on every air rifle and air pistol that's used in international shooting. And what that is a mark from the German government, or requirement by the German government, that says that particular air rifle or air pistol does not exceed some standard feet per second that they would classify as a firearm. Okay. So you can have an air rifle or air pistol, and you can be out there training. So that is an option for someone that if they did want to do shooting sports, they could do air rifle or air pistol while they were stationed in Europe. However, what you just said, I found out at the time we had a guy that was trying to get on the Air Force team that had shot air rifle like in high school, I think, and then he enlisted, came in. He got stationed in Italy, and he was sending me messages while I was in Europe or when I was in Germany, and telling me how he was doing. He was going to a local club to train, but he couldn't possess his own air rifle till he'd been shooting air rifle for like a full year in Italy, because the Italian government had different thoughts on air rifles and air pistols, and they considered them to be firearms like anything else. And so he was very restricted in even what he could do there.
I wonder why that is.
Well, every European country has their own, unique requirements, right?
I thought they were a union.
Well, and that's why, like what I had, the European Union weapons pass allowed me to transit, like, so Denmark and Luxembourg and all that without issue. But if you
wouldn't be able to necessarily go to Italy, then would you?
Well, no, because they're part of the EU, and I had that weapons pass. The Italy would recognize that EU pass.
Oh, okay.
But if I had flown into, or if I had got stationed out the gate in Italy, I would have
to go through that
whole process,
okay.
to prove myself. And
it's a good thing they have good food.
Yeah.
I guess it was better than. I guess it was better that you got stationed in Belgium to start.
It was. And again, it's just that I was lucky. So I think that it is true for the most part that it is very difficult as an American to shoot in Germany. But there were Americans like at Ramstein, especially like civilians that had been there for years that had their weapons passes and shot plenty. And then sometimes you can even own stuff in Europe that you could not own in America. I will never forget when I went to Belgium, you could buy a World War II Thompson full auto machine gun for €800. Problem, of course, being you could never bring it back.
I wouldn't care.
Guess I'd never be going back.
Yeah,
it's fine.
But that was when I moved to Belgium, and in around 2005 or 6, they had some crazy guy do a shooting somewhere, and then they suddenly became a lot more restrictive on their requirements. In fact, at one point, I had to have a letter from our security forces saying that I wasn't psychologically unstable that I had to carry with me when I would go shoot. When I was in Germany, I had to go back and shoot matches in Belgium. Wow. I had to produce that and say that.
Now, how long did it take you to, once you got past the not getting arrested part, how long did it take you to get your paperwork for your German EU card?
A month or two. It wasn't bad. It came pretty quick. Yeah.
Okay.
The only thing that was weird, I'm sorry.
They're very efficient.
Yeah. The only thing that was weird about, you talked about European countries being a little different, or why is one way or why is one another. Well, I had applied for a German sports shooter's license. There were two types of gun licenses in Germany. There's a sports shooter's license and there's a hunting license. And I had that Keltec 32, and the Keltec 32 was perfectly legal in Belgium. But in Germany, under the sports shooter's license, it wasn't legal. It was only legal under a hunting license, and it had something to do with like barrels under 3 inches. You had to have a hunting license to be able to possess that. So this was weird too. I had to work with the provost marshal office because I'm like, well, I have this pistol. I didn't know that it couldn't be registered in Germany. And so the provost marshal's office, I scheduled a trip basically back home to visit my folks, and the provost marshal's office, the representative came with me to the airport with his paperwork to saying like, hey, he thought he was registering this or that he could register this in Germany, but it's not possible under the laws here. He did have it legally registered in Belgium. He's just going to fly out with it and leave, right? So get it out of the country. And of course, as luck would have it, when we get to the airport, they don't want to see any paperwork. They're just like, oh, you got a gun? Okay. Is it locked up? Okay. And it went away. But I'll never forget, the poor guy traveled with me like at 5 o'clock in the morning to the airport to be my representative to make sure I don't, get in trouble or something like that. So, and then I got my little Keltec out of Germany.
Well, shout out to that guy.
Yeah. He was really cool. Unfortunately, he was within a couple of years of retirement. So I have no idea, who runs that program, or again, what even the current statuses are in those countries for how to to be a sports shooter. I will say that was it about 4 or 5 years ago, I went back to Belgium, and my old club in Germany put up a notice that they were having their annual I guess it's like foreigners shoot. Like they used to have like a match for non-Germans every year. And I knew that match was going on right when we were in Belgium. And I was like, but I was like, how do I get my rifle over there now? That'd be probably a really cumbersome process. Plus we're just trying to come there for vacation. So the club was cool enough because they remembered me. They're like, well, hey, just bring your leathers and, all your other gear and leave your rifle at home, and you can borrow a club rifle. So I actually got to go back and shoot a match in Germany about 2015-ish time frame, using a club rifle, and that was awesome.
Did it shoot as well as your gun?
It didn't. But it was a fun experience. The thing about Smallbore, you get so in tune with whatever you're shooting or the rifle that you primarily use, and you just really learn how to fine tune it for you to make it the best that it can be. And I will say that in subsequent years, even after I left Europe, I've just learned so much more about the sport, and I've gotten so much better at it. And I look back, I'm like, if I knew the things that I knew now, back then, I would have been slaughtering them left and right at the matches. I mean, I was doing great. I was winning lots of things when I was out there, but it's just funny the things you learn. And I will credit, because it's internationally legal right now. It's legal for NRA matches too, which is primarily what I've been doing stateside. But I have a zero pulse sling that I use, and it's amazing. Mech makes it. Mech is like a big specialized international gear manufacturer, and that sling, there's just nothing else like it out there that I've ever seen. I mean, there's like zero heartbeat coming across my sling, and there's been times like in matches in years past where maybe I'm nervous because we had to rush or something like that, and you get in position, and you start shooting, and you can see that the rifle going
bounce
up there, but
yeah,
you see the bounce. But with the zero heartbeat sling, it's very minimal. It's amazing.
So how did they accomplish that?
Science.
If I had it handy, I'd show it to you. But basically, the way they have it is the cuff that goes around your sleeve. There's like a spring and a connection piece, and something about that spring and connector, the way it's designed to the rest of the sling, just allows it to be to work in that capacity to not induce any heartbeat. Because that's one of the things too. Maybe I should have explained, is that the reason that you wear the specialized jacket and the sling and have the special rifle and all that is designed to provide the best possible shooting that you can do, right? And your body's always in a constant state of motion. Even when you're standing still, you've got your heartbeat, you've got breathing, maybe jitters, whatever. And that heavy jacket and the glove and all the other gear is designed to dampen the effects of that from manifesting themselves upon the rifle.
Yes, absolutely. That's why you wearing a sweatshirt underneath. I would have to finagle I'd have to find that sweet spot on my arm for my sling to minimize the chance of seeing that heartbeat. Because the farther out you go, I mean, when you're at 1,000 yards, the last thing you want to see is this.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not a good thing.
And for high power and for NRA matches, you can get away with wearing, whatever sweatshirt or sweatshirts you want when you shoot. But for international, it's very regulated. And so actually I could only wear I have a special shooting sweater made by Moosh that I have underneath my shooting jacket. And even that, it matches. They bring out the calipers and they're checking the thickness of it. I can't put another sweatshirt on top of that. But when I go shoot NRA matches, it's game on. I have a sweatshirt on, I have a Moose shirt on top of that. It really helps you fill in the jacket, and it helps with the performance. But again, that's just the disparity between NRA small bore and international. Which
it's that scene in Friends where Joey puts on all of Chandler's clothes, and he comes and he's like, "I'm not wearing any underwear."
Yeah, I mean, I've heard jokes about it, like some of the things that you can get away with on NRA matches. I mean, at Camp Perry, every few years you hear somebody gluing themselves to their prone mat. That's legal. You can do it.
Yeah,
someone's going to peel you up off of it when you're done. But there's all sorts of things that they're just looser with the rules for NRA matches than compared to the ISSF. But the problem with the sport, I would say, that at least in America, is that because we have so many other types of shooting available in America, the USPSA, the IDPA, IPSC, Steel Challenge, subgun matches, all this stuff. We have so many people that get into the shooting sports that gravitate towards those things because they're fun. I get it. They're totally fun, and they have a low cost for entry, and they don't require a lot of specialized training just to hop into. And whereas the international style shooting outside of high schools and collegiate fields, you just don't see a lot of people doing it because there's a substantial dollar amount involved out the gate. If you especially if you just try to like fall into it, unless you have a generous club that lets you loan equipment, it's very hard to get into. And that's why the Air Force International Rifle Team is so small now, and likely it could go away in the next few years. Just because we've had people contact me, or even my predecessors, about wanting to get on the team. They shot in high school, or they shot at the Air Force Academy, or in college, and they're like, "Hey, I want to shoot." And when I explained to them that our budget is less than $10,000 a year, and that we're not going to be able to buy them equipment, especially can't buy them a rifle or a pistol, that they're going to have to come up with that money on their own. If they're just getting started in the military, dropping $5,000 on all the gear that you need just to be minimally competitive is kind of a big feat for most people, and I can understand that. So it's it's this international style of shooting is largely just going away in America, because again, people gravitate towards the kind of the sexier sports, and whereas when you go to Europe, because guns are a bit more regulated, people really only have the options of falling into the Olympic style of shooting. So when you go to like a shooting range in Europe, chances are it's going to be like a 50-meter range or a 10-meter range, and they'll be shooting a rifle and small bore and pistol and whatever.
It's just more of a barrier to entry here than over there.
Yes. Yeah. So it's kind of flipped in a way. But then, I hear people, they go shoot IDPA and practical shooting type matches and stuff in Europe, like big international matches. And I don't know. I don't know how people, I'm guessing that, there's probably some small clubs out there doing it. And, Switzerland obviously is different as well. They have a lot of different types of shooting, more akin to what you would find in America. So I could see that being more common there. But a lot of the shooting that we do is stuff that's just not allowed. In fact, there's even calibers in Belgium that are considered war calibers that you just can't own, that you could own here. Well,
and we had a Canadian couple on that we shot USPSA nationals with last year, and they were saying that there are some countries where 9mm 9x19 is illegal to have, so they'll shoot 9x18 or 9x20
yes.
or not, just a slight variation because they're not allowed to have that calibers.
Right.
So it's definitely different in other countries.
Yeah, or they'll shoot their 38 Super Comp or something like that because it's not the
the war caliber.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I can't go to Europe because I'm a war caliber.
Well, when I was in Europe for 7 years, and like I said, I met my wife there. I love Belgium. I love going back. And at a certain point when I left Europe, I was like, I'm going to retire back here. This is where I want to be. But I've definitely since that time accumulated many more guns that I could never bring over. And
we would be happy to rehome them for you.
I bet you would.
Whenever you want.
In case you have a boating accident, just let us know.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Team players is what we're called.
I see. Yeah.
Unselfish.
So a little bit on the personal side, is your wife Belgium?
She is. She's Belgium.
No, Belgium is a country, Dave.
I know, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm just.
Yeah, and she's from so Belgium is unique in that it's.
She tall?
She's fairly tall.
Okay.
Like 5'10", 5'11".
So 5'7", not quite 5'16" like you.
Right. Yeah. She's not that tall, but
okay.
And to also say that this was kind of rude, not rude, but this was wrong in retrospect. But I found a place when I was in Belgium that this guy that ran it, his name was Crazy Eddie. And you can Google him. His name's like Eddie Van Open, I think is what it comes. No, maybe it's not Van Open. But anyway, it's in a town called Zoltigem, and which literally means like crazy man's hand. But it was right next to a police station, and he had a range that you could go there and shoot machine guns. And like no one at work, I found out this guy from someone in the shooting community in Belgium, and went to
There's
work
that
one day
email
and was
again.
telling people, it's like, we can go there and shoot machine guns. And I got people from, again, 16 different countries, like, you can, no way. And I'm like, that's what I'm hearing. I'm like, we just show up and so we went as like one day as an office, or like the people that were interested in NATO traveled with me out to this range. And that was the first time I ever got to shoot a M249 in an indoor range, belt fed and everything.
Wow.
And then he had Uzis and MP5 and Thompson submachine guns, and you could shoot all this. And I brought my wife with me. She was my girlfriend then, and she'd never shot before. And so I was like, I was thinking to myself, the things you think when you're young. But I thought, if I could ever shoot my first gun ever, it would be, it would be something in full auto. And I'm like, I want you to shoot an AK-47 in full auto for your very first like gun experience. And she did it. And like, she didn't think anything of it. And it was fine. It's just, in retrospect, I'm like, that was stupid. Why would I?
That was only going to go one of two ways. Either really good or horribly wrong.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Well, I explained to her that, you don't want to hold it down, just fire a few and let off, fire a few and let off.
Okay.
And she did fine with it. But yeah, just in retrospect now, I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, why would I do that to somebody?
How I know she's a really, really cool lady.
Yeah, yeah. Well, at that time, like, in subsequent years, she might shoot here and there, like when we go visit friends somewhere and they have some guns and we want to go out and shoot. But she didn't really do a lot of shooting with me until we moved to South Carolina. Yeah, South Carolina. She started coming out to the range with me a bit more. And then when I got to Georgia and started doing the USPSA and the Steel Challenge type stuff, she was kind of getting interested. She definitely liked coming to those matches more than small bore matches. Because I will tell you a little secret about small bore matches. If anyone ever asks you to come out there with them to watch a small bore match, don't go. It's like watching paint dry. It's so boring because someone's in position and they're never moving, right? This like they're moving, shooting. They're just moving their arm, loading, shooting. It's just like, again, it's like watching paint dry. Even I find watching small bore shooting just boring. Unless it's like the Olympics and it's the finals where they got everything televised at once and you can see like how people are doing, neck and neck. But the qualification stages and all that, it's so boring to watch. Whereas obviously, the more action style shooting is interesting for spectators to watch because you're moving and shooting. Some targets are falling down, and she liked that. And then I talked her into actually shooting with me. So she's been competitively shooting with me, at least on a Steel Challenge and USPSA for the last 2 or 3 years.
I can tell you from
watching paint dry. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
Not watching the paint dry.
Not watching the paint dry. Yeah. Yeah. Well, she told me,
again,
she's like, this is so much more interesting to watch than your small bore stuff. I'm like, well, it is. So.
Yeah. I took my family to a high power rifle match and they pretty much abandoned me. So.
Yeah. I can see that.
Same thing.
Were they
same problem
by the end of it?
They were, and they hated me.
Sounds about right.
So,
sounds about right.
Yeah. Until I got my oldest, I handed him my data book and my scope, my spotting scope. And I'm like, here, just every time I shoot, put a little tick mark where it's at and write some stuff down. And then he's like, oh, okay, cool. Fine. I got something to do.
Yeah. Give him an activity. Yeah. That
Exactly.
makes a difference.
It does.
His young men are very good shooters, by the way.
Awesome.
It's annoying.
Now,
that's important, I think, to carry on that legacy, to carry on the shooting tradition.
Yeah, they're not shooting now, unfortunately.
Oh,
disappointing. But
maybe looking back.
Now, how long were you in Europe consecutively?
About 6 or 7. No, wait. 6 years. 6 years in total.
Now, that's not normal for someone in the military, is it, to be stationed overseas for that long at one time?
Well, the NATO assignment, I think I extended for a year. And then I went to school for 6 months while I was there. And then when I came back, and then I PCS'd, and then I was Spingalm for another 2.5 years. So it's possible to extend in some cases. And on the enlisted side, you could stay for years and years. People find all sorts of ways to stay over there.
Must be, well, it's obviously different than in the Air Force. So, I mean, most of the guys in the Marines were looking to get out of Okinawa or Korea, wherever they're at, and back to the States as quickly as possible. So
sure.
Totally
Well, and there's
different.
also a game stateside too that you can do, at least on the enlisted side, where you can almost homestead at a certain location stateside, and then if you want to keep staying there, you just do like a remote to Korea for a year, and you come back and you get to stay for many more years. Some people find that the choices they want to make, especially if they get kids in school and things like that, or roots in the community. But that's one avenue to do something like that.
Okay. Was it all air rifle? I mean, did you shoot 22 small bore in Europe when you were over there? It sounds like it's all air. Okay.
Yeah. So the Master of Flanders series, the Prone series I was talking about, that was all 22 small bore.
Okay.
And then
getting ammo then wasn't difficult.
No. And in fact, that was a neat experience. I got to take my guns into England, which kind of freaked me out a little bit. Because I went to Ely. At that time, I was using Ely. Now I'm using Lapua for my 22.
Okay.
And it just kind of goes on, what works better year to year for what they have available lot wise. But I get to go to the Ely factory and do barrel testing or lot testing on my barrel,
wow.
and that was a great experience. It was really interesting. My European Union Firearms Pass meant nothing to the UK, so I had to apply for a permit to come to England to be able to take my rifle there. And that was a strange experience too, is because I was kind of sweating it. I'm like, man, I'm taking a gun into the UK, and I know the UK's thoughts on guns. In fact, one year when I was flying back to America for a competition, and I transited through London, it was a layover in London. The British bobbies came and got me. And they're like, you brought a rifle over, right? I'm like, well, yeah, but this is not my final destination. And I checked and made sure that this was fine. They're like, well, we're going to have to look at it. And so they made me feel like a criminal, and they escorted me into the stairwell, and they brought my rifle case into the stairwell and had me unlock it. And they looked at it. They had no idea what they're looking at. And they're like, okay. And then they closed it up, and they locked it, and then we continued our journey. Yeah. But the first time I went to England with a rifle for the barrel testing, I had my English permit. I had my European Union firearms permit, all this stuff. And it was an early flight into Birmingham, because that's where the factory for Ely's located. And when I flew in, my rifle, or my bag came off the conveyor belt, and my rifle came off the conveyor belt. And there was almost no one at the airport, at least where I was at this time. It was so early in the morning. And so I'm kind of waiting a minute. I'm like, surely there's going to be some customs official that's going to come through here and want to look at, my paperwork and all this. Because it wasn't even looked at when I left Belgium. They didn't care. Again, they're just like, is it in a locked container? I'm like, yeah. So I'm waiting like a couple minutes, and I'm like the only person standing in the carousel area where the bags are, and I just walk out. And then my contact from Ely is there, and he, we get in his car and we drive to the factory. But that was so funny to me, because that day I could have taken anything I wanted into the English airport gun wise, not just a small bore, but maybe something, because they're very restrictive on what they allow in the country in general. And they would have had no idea. So that was so strange. And then 2 years later, I went back and did the same thing, or flew back in. And then it was a completely different experience. They are like some really stuffy guy, like maybe wait. And then he announces to everyone in the concourse, this man has a firearm, please wait, or something like that. I'm like, oh my Lord, God. Are you killing me, buddy? And then these bobbies came by with MP5s, and they're like, they were cool. They were like relaxed. They're like, yeah, it's fine. He's got a rifle. Here's his paperwork. It's good. So night and day difference on the two occasions I flew into England with a rifle.
Well, and it is interesting because their police, it's almost like two separate police services, because they have their regular police that don't carry any weapons at all.
Right.
Bobbies, yeah.
And they have their stab vests. Like, they don't even wear bulletproof vests.
Yeah.
They wear stab vests.
Because of the knife crime, yeah.
Yeah. And then they have their armed police service, which is like a special division of the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me. But it's very different, obviously. But yeah,
that's totally true. I told you I'm a big movie buff. Something I just learned is just a bit of trivia, really quick. Are you familiar with the film Matrix Reloaded, the second Matrix film? There's the Silver Twins that were in the film, or the twins as they're known, and they had UMP rifles in the film, and stateside, the promo poster that had them featured had them both with their switchblades, because that was another weapon that they had, were switchblades. But because of knife crime in the UK, that same post in the UK, the knives were replaced with UMP 45s or UMP 9s, I think it was, because that was seen as less fearsome to the UK populace, showing a gun because they're not so familiar with that than a knife. You know, I thought that was so strange.
Well, because they'll never see those over there.
Yeah,
but the knives.
But that knife.
Well, they're talking about restricting the size of kitchen knives over there.
Absolutely. And I'll use that as a segue to show one of 20 ever imported UMP 9s in the United States.
Wow.
So
I need a different job.
I just need to walk through your museum. I mean, you have like a museum of pieces. I mean, I'll pay to walk through and see these things.
Is that one of the ones that can go back to Europe? Because if not, I'll add another thing to the wall. I can put it,
somewhere over there.
Area.
Yeah. The UMP 9, like if you ever travel to Europe, you'll see it with Portuguese police, Spanish police, some Belgian police as well. But the reason there were only ever 20 imported is that particular design. No one wanted it in the early 2000s in America from law enforcement perspective. They didn't want another 9mm like MP5. They wanted something bigger, like a 40 or 45. So you're more likely to see in the United States the 40 cal variants and some 45 out there. But that was one of 20 that was assembled from a parts kit of something like a D-mill parts kit that Tom Bostic put together. But it's genuine German barrel and stuff like that. So pretty rare.
So you know it's good.
Yeah, supposedly, right? And actually, I've shot that one in PCC for Steel Challenge, and I'm almost as fast with that as I am with my go-to gun for PCC is Scorpion Evo.
Okay.
And in fact, David, that's what I was running at the match the other weekend. But but yeah, just taking out the UMP 9, it's just fun because it's such a rare gun to see, but it does shoot really well.
Now, how fast are you in Steel Challenge with your on shoots?
I don't think that would work very well. And that's also something you said about like what kind of danger could you do with an air rifle? Well, I don't know what kind of danger you can really cause with an on shoots rifle. I mean, obviously it is a rifle; it shoots 22. But I always joke with people, unless we're getting invaded by aliens that are like little black discs at 50 meters. I mean, that gun is useless outside of an international shooting environment. But I do plan to run on Steel Challenge here one of these days. I have a nylon 66 that was passed down to me from my dad, Winchester nylon 66. And I found a company that makes a sort of like a speed loader for it, because the way that particular 22 loads is through the stock in the rear. It has like this little rod you pull out and you can just dump the rounds in and you put the rod back in. You're Googling what this is right now, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah.
I
this company made this like speed loader for it that is like a tube that can quickly drop in. I think it holds like 14 or 15 rounds in the stock. And that is a really, really fun 22 to shoot. And so I do plan to bring that out at some point to Steel Challenge with that special tube or speed loader.
It's almost like those shotgun loaders. Like the speed loaders for like a 3-gun, where it has the ramp. It's similar to that.
Yeah, it's like spring loaded, so it just kind of shoots them all in there, like an injection sort of thing. But that kind of excited me because I've always loved shooting that nylon 66. I've been shooting it since I'm a kid, and I was like, wow, I could shoot this, the rimfire rifle irons category and have some fun and honor my dad. And I also honor my dad by shooting his 1911 Les Bear
nice
custom.
Oh,
I started doing a single stack competition for this, and then actually I did my first real true high power match earlier this year at the Navy matches in May on Quantico, and I was borrowing my buddy's high power rifle, and I found out that I'd also signed up for the pistol matches, and I'd never done that before. My buddy's like, yeah, I think you could shoot your VP9 or whatever you want at those matches, but generally it's service pistol, right? So I got my dad's 45, and he, unfortunately, before he passed away, he only got like 500 rounds through it. So he never really had a chance to really break it in, but it was his favorite gun before he died. And I took it out and I shot this EIC match. I'm like, this excellence competition. What is this? I can do this. And as luck would have it, I guess I'm pretty good at EIC because I came out for the non-distinguished. I took first place. And that got me 10 points out the gate towards EIC, or my EIC badge. And you only need 30 to actually get the badge. So out the gate to get 1/3 of the points that I need was that was impressive. Now I wasn't chasing points before, but I think I'll continue that and get my EIC badge at some point.
There you go. Yeah, get your Distinguished Shooter's badge.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right, so you mentioned early. Oh, well, first I almost went too fast. What's the rear sight on that Les Bear?
The rear sight, it's the sight from Les Bear.
Okay. All right, very nice. Adjustable, very nice.
Patridge, sorry.
Okay.
And actually, I did change out. My dad wasn't running a fiber optic on the front, so I sent it back to Les Bear because I prefer on pistols, if I can, for competition pistols anyway, I prefer fiber optics. So I switched it out for that. Before it was just a standard post.
It looks like it's a green fiber optic.
Yeah, I like green. Green's
too.
a very nice bright color out on the range.
Yeah, for me, it stands out. I can pick it up a lot quicker. I even, I have a Trijicon RMR that I was using before I went to the SRO, and it's a green dot because I can pick it up quicker than the red.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you said also to ask you about France.
Yes. So shooting in France is an experience. They have annually a shooting competition in the wine region of France, or where they serve, or like where they are primarily growing wine. We were going to place, I'm going to screw up the pronunciation of it, but to me it looks like Mesnil sous Ogre. And it's like, basically they have a small bore range set up that's partially enclosed. Some of the ranges, to answer your earlier question, in Europe were indoors, some were outdoors. It was kind of a mix. You never knew what you were going to get. But in the middle of this wine field, they had this little range set up, and it was like a 4-lane deal. I went in there, I shot my match. My girlfriend or wife at the time, or then girlfriend at the time, now wife, she was sitting there having champagne. Actually, I said wine. It was like Champagne region of France. I'm sorry, the Champagne region of France. So they were all having champagne, watching me shoot. They had like, it was kind of fancy at the time. They had like TV monitors, so you could see people, again, watching the paint dry. But it's a little more entertaining when you have some champagne. And I'll never forget, as soon as I walked out the door from the range, they just thrust a little glass of champagne into my hand, and that was an amazing experience. And the French, the people out there in the shooting community were so welcoming and so nice. You hear bad things sometimes about the French, that they're snooty or whatever. I haven't really run into that so much, but I can say that at least our counterparts in Europe or in France were very welcoming. They were just so impressed to see, an American shooting and joining them, and it was great.
They also had a boatload of champagne.
There was a ton of champagne.
Which helps.
So interesting, in case, a little bit of trivia. It can only actually be called champagne if it is from Champagne.
The champagne.
Or it is otherwise called sparkling wine.
Right.
Yeah. Little factoid for you wine nerds out there.
Yeah.
Fact check that.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was in the Marines, we were in France at one point, and the French army was running their mouth about something. So we almost had an international incident. Yeah, our platoon, we were like, I was in a reconnaissance
good ambassadors.
Platoon, so we were all ready to throw down. The lieutenant's like, we need to get out of here. So I don't even remember what it was about now. I think it had something to do with our rifles. So we were ready to throw down. Yeah. And I forget the port we were in. But anyway, same thing. They definitely had attitudes, but part of that, I wonder, is how many ugly Americans came through there, like me, that gave them attitude first.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it wasn't a one-way street. So food was very good, though. Food was amazing.
Yeah.
Butter makes everything better. Butter and bacon.
You're not wrong.
Just saying.
Not at all.
And they make their own butter over there.
You have anything else, Leo?
I mean, if you just want to start rolling out guns and just putting them across the screen, just so I know what I'm going to get when you move back to Europe.
I think I've pulled out the key things. I don't think I've shown my Scorpion Evo, but we all know what that looks like.
I mean, it's fine. No, honestly, you covered everything. I'm very impressed. I'll be huggy for a second. I'm just really thankful that you came out and we really appreciate everything that you do. And yeah, I agree with the things that you said. So,
oh, thank you. Yeah, no, this has
there
been
you go.
fun.
Just since we missed Huggy today.
Yeah,
So.
You got to say
no, it's
Robert.
awesome. It's true.
You got to say Robert because he,
Robert says we're coming out. And we just, I mean, we're talking about France, so we may as well.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But how long? Actually, I do have one. How long were you in France for that comp? Like, how many days?
I think we got there. I think it was like just we went there on a Friday night and then came back on a Sunday afternoon.
Okay.
So just a weekend trip.
Did you do any movie related trips when you were out there?
Not in France, but when I was working on that task force I mentioned at Ramstein, I did get to go do a Hollywood deployment, as I call it. And I went to Morocco for 2 weeks and made, I shot 2 weeks of footage for a movie called The Green Zone.
Good movie.
Which it's okay. It's okay. I was hoping
this is the Matt Damon one that we were talking about before we started.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, they the filmmakers were looking for folks that could reasonably portray U.S. military, and they paid me like 700 British pounds a week plus per diem. And I never thought they'd let me leave the task force to go do it, but it was towards the end, and they're like, "Well, we can't deny you your leave." And so 2 days later, I was on a flight to Casablanca, and it was shot in Rabat, which is like the capital of Morocco. And it was neat because I was one of the first extras to show up. And people in my hotel just saw me as, some white American guy, and they all thought I was a famous actor. And so I was like signing autographs in the hotel because people were like, autograph. And I'm like, yes, indeed.
So is Casablanca all that it's made out to be?
Oh, I was a little bit disappointed. I wasn't in there for very long. It was basically just a transit city for the airport. But the thing that always stuck out in my mind about Casablanca was that, oh, maybe I shouldn't say this. Well, it's an observation, right? I'm not disparaging anything, about it. But I will say an observation that I made was that there were dead dogs outside the airport, just like on the grass. I guess cars had hit them or whatever, and that was different.
I mean, I will say I do know that in Islam, dogs are viewed as dirty animals. So I don't know if that's like an intention. I don't know. But like in Nicaragua, we have the exact opposite thing where my parents are from. The dogs are so smart that they actually check before they cross the street. They look into traffic.
Oh, they're trained.
So maybe their dogs are just dumb. I don't know.
Yeah.
They just have stupid dogs.
Maybe.
Like, it's weird. Like, the dogs over there
different.
act like people. They're like, oh, no, hold on. Wait. Okay, we're good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as far as like the other experience in Rabat itself, I mean, it looked very like picturesque Middle Eastern kind of city, and it reminded me of, like, the market area reminded me of the scene in Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he's crossing through this town where there's like all these little shops and things like that.
The market,
the market,
where they're carrying her with all the baskets and everything.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't see that so much. They're a little more modern than that, but just that style, that the market or whatever, my mind reminded me of that. And then it turned out that they'd shot. I'm drawing a blank here. There's Leonardo DiCaprio film, Bodyguard of Lies or Body of Lies.
Yes, Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They had shot that 3 months prior to me getting there, and they had done such a good job for Green Zone with the CG that they incorporated in the film that I could barely recognize any of the locations watching the Green Zone. However, when I watched Body of Lies, I'm able to pick out all the places that we shot at because we used a lot of the same sets.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was interesting.
Yeah, Body of Lies. That was a good movie.
Yeah.
That's where they do that scene in the desert where they circle around them and they make it so that they can't see them or whatever.
Yeah, that was really it was good. And to me, again, it's just kind of like when I watch that movie now, it's just like a nostalgia for Rabat. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember all those places. So
yeah,
it's fun.
I know the guy Hussein that works there that gave me my coffee.
Yeah, the end, I'll never forget the end scene in Body of Lies where Russell Crowe and Leonardo DiCaprio are talking. That cafe, I used to go to that cafe almost every time. Well, probably like 2 or 3 times a week and have coffee and have breakfast and all that. So
I do hear their coffee is amazing. I don't drink coffee, but I hear their coffee is amazing.
yeah, it was good. It was really good. If you catch me a year from now after I retire, I'll tell you another story about that particular cafe.
Ooh.
So,
okay.
Retirement cafe story.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to throw out too, just to pull it back into shooting, is I'm a very, very big proponent of a school down in Georgia called, and this is not an endorsement again. This is just an experience that I had that I'd like to share, of a school in Georgia called the Rogers Shooting School. Have you ever heard of it? Rogers Shooting School?
Nope.
So I found out about it through a podcast that's, what's his name? I should have some more coffee because it's drawing a blank. But Masood Ayub. I hope I said that right. You know that name.
Okay. Yep.
He's run a podcast for a while. I think it was like the Pro Arms podcast or something. And previous job a few years ago, I did a lot of traveling. So I'm like always like listening to podcasts, and I listened to this one podcast, and they were interviewing Bill Rogers, who runs Rogers Shooting School. And he was like talking about their system, and they were talking about how their school, their program is they run you through every day. There's a 5-day course, and you take a test every day. And the test consists of 9 stages, and you're shooting this specialized target system that they're all head plates. And the head plates are anywhere between 7 yards out to about 25 yards. And the thing that really kind of piqued my interest was that the targets are only exposed between a half second to 3/4 of a second.
Ooh.
And you're shooting like really fast and really rapidly. And this was something that was like, man, I've never done that before. I'd be interested in trying that out. I remember like when I was a kid, I was wanting to shoot fast. My dad always be like, that's a waste of ammunition. Quit shooting so fast. It's like I never really had an opportunity to go out and do that. But that piqued my interest, and I was fortunate to be able to go out to that school back in 2018. I went back again actually in 2019 as well. But in 2018, I went out there and shot. And it's interesting that he incorporated a lot of the principles of With Winning in Mind without realizing he never read the book, like he never came across it. But to be able to shoot that quickly, he actually gives you pre-course work before you even show up. You've got to read this book that talks about how to do his style of shooting. And it's not like pointing and shooting. I mean, you're actually able to see the front sight present itself when you're shooting these targets that quickly. And it's an amazing experience. It's something that if I could, I would go back and do it every year. It's incredible. And so they have I'd say a good percentage of people that go there don't pass. So he has like a basic level for passing, and then there's intermediate and there's advanced. And there's a fair number of people every year that just don't pass the basic course. In fact, there was prior to our course, there was a group of Secret Service agents that had come out, and they quit like after the second day because they thought that, hey, we can't shoot this fast. Like they were too stuck in the ways that they've been taught for training that they didn't, I guess, go there with an open mind enough to think that, hey, we can do this. We can try this new style of shooting to be able to do it quickly. The concepts they teach is also really emphasize headshots. And the reason for that is because if you ever, I'm sure you've done some research, but a lot of people, especially determined attackers, can absorb a lot of body shots. But you get a few in the noggin, you're going to take them out. They're not going to be able to keep going and attacking you as a result. And so he's a big advocate of headshots, and that's why you're doing all these head size plates at 7 to 25 yards that pop up really quick. And you can go on YouTube and look at the course, how he's got it set up. It's a special range that he designs. And there are a few places in the nation that have those ranges, but he doesn't advocate actually going out and buying one of those ranges to set up, because it's a very complicated system of pneumatics and stuff to get it to work or to run the right way. But that shooting that week there, that experience, I mean, I shot like 4,000 rounds, 9mm throughout the course, and the course cost really wasn't that bad. I think it's fluctuated a little bit, but for other types of training that are out there, I thought it was pretty economical. But the neat thing was, at the end of that first week, or into that week there, all week I'd been in between like a basic to intermediate score, because every day, again, you take a test, and they take your top top score at the end of the week, and that determines what certificate you get at the end of it. And I used the principles of winning in mind on that very last test to propel me above what I needed to do, or propel me to the score that I was trying to get in the advanced level. And I did get an advanced rating out of that school for urban handgun or tactical handgun. And basically what I was doing was telling myself, I am the best, be the best. I can do this. I've got this. And I was able to keep reinforcing as I was going along every stage, coaching myself in a large regard. And that was great. That was just such an amazing experience. And I love talking about it. And I went back in 2019. I was supposed to go shoot one of his associates courses. His name was Ronnie Dodd. He ran Dodd training up in Tennessee, about an hour or so away from Rogers School. But unfortunately, Mr. Dodd passed away earlier, a couple months ago in an accident. So that school's, I think it's gone. But Rogers School still exists and still going on. And if you ever do want to challenge yourself to find out how quickly you can shoot, I can't recommend it enough. It's an amazing experience, and you probably could even get Bill Rodgers on your show at some point. He's always willing to talk, and he's got an incredible background. He actually founded Safariland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Kind of a big deal.
I thought I'd heard the name Bill Rodgers.
Yeah. So he was an FBI agent, and he started learning how to shoot, doing Bianchi Cup. I don't know how to say that, matches and all that. And he's always, kind of adopted a philosophy of trying to learn to shoot better. And he talks about like the Weaver stance and how people were trying to imitate that for a long time, but not realizing that the reason that guy Weaver was shooting that way is because he was actually had a physical impairment that caused him to shoot the way that he did. That wasn't necessarily the best way. That was just the way that he could. Since he shot well, people were trying to adapt to it. And he goes through all these iterations of different styles that he's tried. And then he talks about his process for rapid shooting, rapid acquisition of the target, and talks about how films are projected at 24 frames per second normally, and that means your mind is seeing 24 images in 1 second. So you're telling me you can't quickly get your sights up there and get them good enough. We're not talking like a precision shot like for Smallbore, but good enough that you can hit that steel roughly enough that you're able to get the sights up there and make that acquisition, teach your eyes to look at it that quickly. And it's sort of matrixy, right? Like you're shooting a bullet time type stuff in a way, but it really works. And it's a very, very challenging experience. And I love it. Professionally, that was one of the highlights of my life, to be able to go out there and do that and shoot well. And that was, that's something to throw out there because not a lot of people know about it. So
no, not at all. That's very interesting. I am going to have to look that up and maybe reach out. That actually sounds very good. So you've already said it. So it looks like in a year you're going to be leaving the Air Force roughly.
Yes.
And there's nobody else after you to maintain the rifle team. Is that what you said?
Well, we have one other guy on the team right now, and he is young enough in his career that I think he'll be able, and he loves this type of shooting, and I think he'll be able to keep with it. But I was to say, just based on my experiences, having been team captain for the last decade and seeing people kind of come and go, that it's unlikely we're going to get an influx of people that gravitate towards international style shooting. Chances are they're more likely to go in shotgun, 3-gun, the action stuff. Just because, again, the cost for entry is a lot lower, and it's just an easier thing to get into. But not to discourage anyone. I mean, I would love to see people come forward, even if they just want to shoot air rifle, if they have their own air rifle, to join the team and keep the flag running. Because the shooting team itself exists because of the international side, right? So it was founded back in the 50s as largely a response to the Soviet Union showing up to the Olympics with all these great shooters, and the America was like, well, we got to have good shooters. Let's go to the military, and so all the services set up their own like international teams. The Marines got out of it as soon as they dropped we used to shoot like a 300 meter as part of an Olympic sport. Shooting 308s and things like that, 6BR. And that's still 300 meters still exists as a discipline, but it's no longer an Olympic discipline because it became too hard to build 300 meter ranges. I don't know if you ever follow the Olympics, but most of the facilities that they build are one-time use. So you don't really sell well to a country you want to introduce the Olympics to. If you're like, we need you to build, you know, or square off like 300 meters of land that you're only going to use one time, you know, for this, you know, Olympic shooting thing. So they got rid of that. And so now it's 50-meter air rifle. 50-meter small bore and air rifle are the only things that you see. Yeah, so the Marines got out of it too once they quit doing like 300-meter. I think the Marines collectively were like, we're not going to touch small bore. That's not for us. We'll stay with high power. And so, but yeah, so Air Force shooting team exists primarily again to support or to create a foundation to basically compete against other nations or you know, adversaries or whatever, to show that America can produce good shooters as well.
Okay. The last question I have for you is, I see the one life-size piece of Terminator memorabilia, or whatever you would like to call it. What are the other two?
So I have a life-size endoskeleton with the 2 plasma rifles and a 40-watt range, on top of a base of like skulls and all that. And then I have a life-size bust of Arnold Schwarzenegger from the very end scene of Terminator 2 as well, where his face is like, you know, you see the metal coming through, and it's made out of medical grade silicone. So it looks like Arnold. I mean, it's amazing how well and how far like technology has come across for those sorts of things. And they say it's rated to last like 25 years or something, maybe longer. You know, they're not really sure, but since it's medical grade silicone, it'll stick around. But again, just that they punch the hair in it and everything, and it's got the leather jacket. And
wow, yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love it. It's fun stuff.
I mean, it's got 2 guns. I don't know if that can go to Europe with you. Again, I mean, I'm willing to house it.
That's so kind of you. That's so kind
visit. Of you. We won't even need to write anything up. You can visit whenever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, people ask too, they're like, do you move with this stuff? And I'm like, well, yeah, like the endoskeleton, it actually, breaks down into 5 boxes that go on a pallet. And I've been moving that thing 4 or 5 times now across the country.
I'm just saying, one more time.
Wow. Straight to your house.
The cost of a ticket.
Yeah. Straight to your house.
It doesn't even sound like it'd be much of a drive to move it.
I mean, I have a truck, is all I'm saying.
That's so kind of you. Yeah.
It would be very well protected and taken care of. And I'm sure that my 5-year-old would not freak out.
I appreciate the help on that.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention again the Air Force Wounded Warrior program. I like to promote that even to people that are already in the Air Force, because it's not well known, unfortunately. And it's such a important program for getting folks that have been, whether they're combat wounded or any sort of illness really, but if they get classified as wounded, ill, or injured, they actually can qualify for the program. And when I started coaching the shooting events for that 6 years ago, I went into it with the idea that it was going to be mostly combat wounded folks, and it's really not. I've worked with folks that actually got paralyzed from the flu vaccine. Epstein-Barr syndrome, I think is what it's called. I've worked with an athlete that had fallen off the side of a hill and broke his back. Car accidents, cancer, combat wounded, of course, as well. But it's one of the things the program likes to say is that not all wounds are visible. And that's very true. You got people with TBI as well. And I met one guy that had worked, he was a pilot or aircrew, I'm sorry. And he had worked at some site that was used to be run by the Russians out in the middle of nowhere somewhere. And this was like several years ago. And he had come back with all sorts of, this doctors still aren't really sure what was wrong with him. They think that maybe like the Russians had stored like, chemicals or something at that site when they were still using it. And, the effects of that like later on for whoever comes through, but it's all shapes and sizes. And that's one of the important things to get out there, is because some people that do get classified as wounded, ill, or injured think that, I don't want to participate in the Air Force Wounded Warrior program because I'm not hurt enough. I'm not injured enough. I don't want to take a spot away from someone that's missing a leg or missing an arm or whatever. And that's just not the case. They actually, at every camp, they group people by injury, basically, or injury class. So a person that is missing both their legs wouldn't run a race against someone that has both their legs. Although with today's prosthetics, the person without any legs probably would run faster. But that's one of the important distinctions to put out there. And I just offer that up if someone does watch this from the Air Force, is that they must realize that if they do have someone, whether a supervisor, or friend, or whoever that does get classified as wounded, ill, or injured, they should work through their recovery care specialist to find out more about the Air Force Wounded Warrior Program and apply for it. They have all sorts of different sports, adaptive sports as they call them, whether it be shooting, we shoot air rifle and air pistol. They have archery, they have swimming, they have wheelchair basketball, weightlifting. I think golf suddenly made it into the mix as well. I mean, they've got all sorts of sports, and they always find a way. If you think you can't do something, they find a way that you can. And that's one of the greatest things about it, is that I've worked with plenty of athletes that have been sitting at home for the last 6 months, feeling sorry for themselves. Like they never thought they'd be 23 and have, some kind of disability or some sort of issue, and they haven't been living. And this program pushes them through like an introductory camp where they run through a bunch of different sports, kind of find out, hey, I can actually do a lot more than I thought I could. And then they can start identifying if they have hidden talents in certain ways. If they've never done shot put before, they might find out they're the world's best shot putter. You just never know. But it's a fantastic program. They run camps throughout the world now. It used to be just the stateside bases, but now they actually reach out to other bases overseas as well. And I can't say enough good things about the program. And it also allows me to sort of give back as part of the Air Force shooting team and provide the training that I've received and experience that I've received to help people funnel that into, finding out about this thing called air rifle shooting and air pistol shooting. And it's been great.
That's awesome.
All right. Yeah. Air Force Wounded Warrior Program. Okay. We'll have to put a link in that or in the show notes for that. So
sure.
Sounds good.
Again, not the Wounded Warrior Project. That's a charity. That's something different. The Air Force Wounded Warrior Program. Yeah. I think the first hit for Google comes up as the Wounded Warrior Project, but the second one should be AFW2.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you for coming on. We appreciate your time, all of the information you shared, and of course the show and tell. That was fantastic.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much.
This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. Our pleasure.
Yeah, we're like Chick-fil-A that way. It's our pleasure. Not a sponsor.
Not yet. You never know.
Maybe someday.
Maybe some Chick-fil-A money.
No.
Yeah.
Take care, Robert.
You too. Bye, guys.
Take it easy.
Until next time.
Don't be a little bitch.
Yeah.